Well, good morning, church. I don't know about you, but I feel like we could just go home. After the worship and communion and then worshiping in, I was sitting over there, and I'm just like, oh man, like I'm filled right now. I'm ready. And I'm like, crap, I got to preach. Right? And maybe that's what you're thinking too, right? Don't leave yet, okay? Because we still have a sermon to get through. So glad that you're here with us. We're in this series called A Life in Rhythm. And today we're going to talk about what it looks like to be out of rhythm. What does that look like for us? I can share an example. About a year and a half ago, probably, maybe 2 years ago now, doesn't really matter, I was guest leading worship at a church here in Southern California, and I brought my son with me, who's a drummer, and so he and I, there are two services. There's a traditional service, and then there's a contemporary service. If you don't know what that means, you missed out on so much. So I had to do the traditional service first, but I had rehearsed everything, and so the traditional service was just Jordan and I. He's playing drums, I'm playing acoustic, and the first song that we were supposed to play is "How Great Thou Art," which great hymn. And then what I was doing though, so a little behind the scenes look for you is we have something in our ears that's just a click. We call it a click, and it keeps you in time. So it's just this really annoying sound that just goes beep, boop, 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 beep, boop. That's all it is, like in your ear. If you ever see people with their, like what just happened here, they had that sound going on in their ears the whole time. And so Jordan, it's always a drummer that starts the click track for me. And so he starts the click track, and I'm starting to play a song that is not "Great is Thy Faithfulness," because I didn't move my iPad screen to go to the right song, and I'm a lot like Ron Burgundy. Whatever's right in front of me, I'm just going to read it, right? And so I'm looking at this screen, and I'm singing and playing Amazing Grace, My Chains Are Gone, to the tempo and the timing of How Great Thou Art. And I get to and that's the first song of the song. They don't know who I am. None of these people do. And I'm trying to sing this song, and I'm getting through the first verse, and it's shockingly pretty similar. And then I get to the chorus, and I'm like, this isn't right. Right? I don't know what's going on, but I'm not feeling like this is what we're supposed to. Something is out of rhythm right here, right now. And so, I just stopped playing. I'm like, guys, you don't know me. I don't know you. I just want to let you know I just messed up. And I'm singing the wrong song to what we're supposed to be doing right now. And they've got the lyrics for "Great is Thy Faithfulness," and this guy's singing "Amazing Grace." It's like, what? Who is this guy, right? So I've never led worship again. No, I have, unfortunately. But here's the thing, is we had to stop the song and start over. And I don't know, maybe you feel like that sometimes in life, right? Where it's just like, this just isn't working. Whatever this thing is, maybe it's why you're at church this morning. Have you ever felt that life just isn't adding up to what you thought it was going to be? Anybody else? Maybe some Bills fans in the room? Hey, my team didn't even make it, okay? So I can just do this, right? Or any Niners fans in the room? Life just this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Life isn't all that I dreamed it was going to be. So you find yourself here at church. Nobody comes in on a winning streak for the very first time. You come into church and you're like, this is my last-ditch effort. Because life just doesn't make sense. And can I give you a little secret? There's a lot of us that have maybe come to church for a long time, and we secretly feel that way. Man, this isn't making sense to me. This life that was promised to me, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like I'm out of rhythm. I'm out of time with what God has for me. Maybe that's you. And I think Jesus has some things to say about that for us. So if you have a Bible, turn up to John chapter 10. We're going to be bouncing around a little bit today, but I want to start in John chapter 10. John chapter 10, starting in verse 9. We're going to pick up in the middle of what Jesus is saying, which I don't usually say, let's do that, but we're going to do that this morning. What he's doing is he's having this conversation with Pharisees, and he had just healed a blind person, and then he claims to be God, and the Pharisees are like, no, you're not. basically I'm going to sum that up. So then we get to verse 9. All right, John chapter 10, verse 9. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. What does it mean to have life to the full? In some translations it says the abundant life. We'll answer that in a moment, but I want to draw attention to the thief. How many of you guys, I was asking our executive pastor to make sure I'm not the only one in the room who thinks this. How many of you guys, when you read this, and you've read it before, it's actually like what has formed Anthem Church. This is like the backbone of Anthem Church, John 10:10. The thief comes only to kill, steal, and destroy, but I have come that they might have life, and they might have it to the full, or they might have it abundantly, this abundant life. What does that thief mean? What does the thief represent? If you're like me, you always think Satan, right? Anybody else? Like, I know, let's just show hands. Who thinks Satan? All right, guess what? Not Satan. Sort of. It is Satan, but it's also not Satan. What Jesus is saying, it's false teachers and the religious leaders of that time. Anything that you're saying that is taking you away from Jesus is the thief. Anything that takes you away from Jesus is the thief. So yes, that does include Satan, but what Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, the people are saying that they can reject Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life, and some other way to get to the Father. That's the thief, and that thief only wants to come to kill, steal, and destroy. For us, it can be anything we believe to bring us satisfaction and to bring us into that abundant life. That's what that is. Whatever you put your faith into, that's not Jesus, is what the thief is. So we can say it's Satan, sure, but let's get real practical and tactical. The thief is potentially your job. If job security is the thing where you're like, this is what's going to make me have an abundant life, then guess what? Your job is the thief. If it's relationships with a spouse or with kids or with friends, guess what? They're the thief. Don't call your spouse a thief, though, please. We don't want to do that much marriage counseling, okay? So don't do that. But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're getting the abundant life from anything that's other than Jesus, they are the thief in this situation. So this leads us to another passage where Jesus refers to himself as a door. In this passage, he says, I am the gate. You come through me. He also says he's the shepherd. He also said he's the gatekeeper. So he's like everything. In Matthew 7, turn over there real quick. These are our two guiding texts for today. Matthew chapter 7. Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount, and which is Matthew 5 through 7. He's giving this brilliant sermon. And in Matthew chapter 7, verse 13, you guys probably know this if you've been in church for a second. Verse 13 says, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. We're familiar with this passage, right? For those of you that have been in church for a while, you've heard this passage before. And we look at this, and we see that same word, life. Abundant life, overflowing life. And we look at a passage like this. I don't know, growing up, I thought that this narrow road and the wide gate that leads to destruction, that's heaven and hell. You guys think that too? Eternity starts now. It's not for later. This is not a passage that's saying, hey, when you die, this is what your reward is. It's saying right now, those who choose the narrow way will have life, will have that abundant life. And those who choose a more wide path are going to find destruction. There's two different paths. There's a wide and easy versus the narrow and difficult. There's two paths represented here. And guess what? We hardly ever stop to ask which path we're on, don't we? Do we ever stop to ask which path I'm on? Well, I'm a Christian, so obviously I'm on the narrow path. Because when we read this verse, we read these verses and we think heaven and hell, that's what our assumption is. Well, obviously I accepted Jesus as my Savior, so I'm on the narrow path, right? Wrong. There are so many people who believe in Jesus, believe in what he's done for them, have asked for forgiveness, and are on this wide path that leads to destruction. Because growing up for me, coming to Jesus was a singular event. A singular event. I'm going to say this prayer and then I'm good. In fact, in high school, we did this whole trip to Canada because we're in Michigan, so we're close to Canada. So we go to Toronto, and the whole idea of what we were supposed to do, we were at this conference where you're supposed to share your faith. It was all about evangelism. And so we would just have to go up to people on the street and start sharing our faith, which is really fun. And especially for an introvert. Hi, random stranger. Would you like to hear about my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? And most people said no, shockingly. He thought Canadians were nice. No, they're not. They did say sorry after they said no, though. So, no, sorry. My friend Dana, he went up to this one guy. And he was like, hey, do you want to accept Jesus as your Savior? And the guy's like, what? He's like, no, don't worry. You don't have to change your life or nothing. All you have to do is just say a prayer and you're good. But that's the theology that we kind of grew up with, right? Say this prayer and then you're good. Live the life however you want to live. Because if we believe that the narrow and wide gate is more about heaven and hell and not just what abundant life is here and in an unfulfilled life, well, then that's the theology that we're going to get to. But there is a narrow way to live our lives. So we have to stop and ask, wait, which path am I on? Just because you call yourself a Christian doesn't mean you're on the narrow path that leads to life. See, we have to ask the question, which path are we on? And instead of asking that question, we're just more obsessed with how we can get there faster and more efficiently. And if then the journey that I'm on is shaping me into the person I want to grow old into, then that's great. But what if the journey that I'm on isn't shaping me into the person I want to grow old with? Then getting there faster and more efficiently just keeps me on the wrong path, but faster and more efficiently. Is this who I meant to become or who I accidentally became along the way? Is the way that I'm living right now, or when I project myself in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, what is that going to look like for me? Am I going to be the person that I wanted to become, or is it just the kind of the way I became? Jesus calls us into an abundant life. He calls us to follow him. So if we want to know about the abundant life, we should probably look at the life of the one who calls us, yeah? So what I want to do for the few moments we have left is look at what Jesus said and look at the life of Jesus for what does it look like to have an abundant life. I think we can all agree that we want an abundant life, right? Can we all agree on that? I know it's like 9 o'clock, but can we just agree on that, church? That yes, I want an abundant life. Whatever that looks like for me. Abundant life is better than a non-abundant life, right? More abundant, less abundant. Which one do you choose? I'll take the more abundant one. Okay, thank you. Now so we want to look at this. Here's what, maybe in your mind, this is what abundant life looks like. It is, okay, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to go to my favorite coffee roaster and get the best single origin cup of coffee that's the right temperature where I don't burn my mouth and there's nobody else there. I can just walk in, get my coffee, and then I go out to my super awesome sports car or whatever that thing is, my big F-150, F-250, F-350, sure. And then we're just driving down the PCH with the windows rolled down and the sun is shining and it's 75 degrees. It's going to be 77 today. And then we stop at our favorite restaurant along the way, and we have a nice drink with a spouse, whoever it is, and then that's the rest of the day. We're just hanging out, celebrating each other, looking at the ocean, staying on the beach, and just like, oh man, that's the abundant life, right? Whew. Let's just stop now and go do that, actually. And if you go to church, you know a little bit probably, like, I don't think that's the abundant life. We know the abundant life isn't health, wealth, and prosperity and all of the wonderful things, right? We kind of know that to be true, but don't we secretly kind of hope that to be true? Just a little bit? driving down the road, listen to Foo Fighters or whatever it is you want. For me, that's that. What if I told you that you're not entirely wrong? You're not entirely wrong. You're like, wait a second, let me look at this. We'll get to it. Hold on. You're not entirely wrong. But if that's the only definition of an abundant life, then like me at that church, you're singing the wrong song. And that thief only wants to steal, kill, and destroy. Because if that's your definition of the abundant life, then what happens when tragedy strikes? Is your abundant life just completely... What happens when your microphone does really crazy stuff like that in the middle of a sermon? What then to your abundant life? What happens when tragedy strikes? Is our abundant life so fragile that it just fractures in an instant? Is Jesus' abundant life really that fragile? Where when tragedy strikes or bad news or you lose that job, whatever it is that just mean our abundant life is shattered? Well, if we believe in Jesus, no. But even if we do believe in Jesus, I think a lot of us hope that that's the abundant life, and it's just not. With the time remaining, we're going to look at 3 areas of Jesus' life that give clues to the abundant life and see if we can't start singing the right song. See if we can't start singing the right song. The first one is this, that the abundant life feels everything. The abundant life feels everything. So, is it driving down the PCH, listening to Foo Fighters with really great coffee with your spouse, and it's just an awesome time, the sun is shining? Yes, you can feel all of that, but is it also sitting in a hospital room with that person who you've loved for your entire life and watching them slip away? And sharing tears with that person or with the family around you, is that also the abundant life? Yes. Because the abundant life feels everything. Romans 12:15 tells us to rejoice with those who rejoice and to mourn with those who mourn. And if we look at the life of Jesus, we see that Jesus felt everything. I didn't know how to put this point on here, and so I just went with it because feelings, right? We can't trust feelings. Feelings aren't good. Like, how many of you go like, no, don't trust your feelings. Don't trust this. Don't feel things, especially guys. Don't get emotional. Don't whatever, like just suck it all up. Get it in there. Like, don't let that tear fall. If you're Irish, maybe that's what your thing is, right? I don't know why I'm picking on the Irish. I just know some Irish, and they're like, don't cry. That's not in my notes. Okay. Jesus felt everything, you guys. Jesus felt everything. Every range of emotion. You go to Matthew 11:19. Jesus, don't go there, but Jesus claims that the Pharisees called him a drunkard and a glutton. You're having too good of a time, Jesus. You must be a drunkard and a glutton. You're eating too much and you're drinking too much. He was accused of being a drunkard and a glutton. Then John 11:35 is the shortest verse in the Bible. I've memorized it since I was a kid. Jesus wept. He's right in front of Lazarus' tomb, and he's with those who are weeping, and he's moved to compassion, and he's crying. So which one is the abundant life, Jesus? The one where you're a drunkard and a glutton, or the one where you're weeping? Yes, because the abundant life feels everything. Luke 22:44 describes Jesus' prayer in the garden before his crucifixion as he's sweating drops of blood. Isaiah 53:3 foretells us that Jesus is a man of sorrows, familiar with pain. So Jesus calls us into an abundant life, and Jesus feels every single emotion. Is this the abundant life? Yes, all of it. The abundant life feels everything. Jesus allowed himself to feel the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. Living the abundant life is experiencing the PCH with the sun out and the top down, but living the abundant life is also crying with that family in the hospital room, grieving with the widow, sharing in the pain of the recent diagnosis of a friend. It's both things happening at the exact same time. As a pastor, can I tell you that by far, I prefer doing a funeral compared to a wedding. Because a funeral has the entire range of emotion. And some of you are like, well, my wedding was kind of like a funeral, so. Call us later for counseling, right? But at a funeral, we sit with the family. As a pastor, you sit with the family, and we grieve with the family. There's tears that are shed with the family, but at the same time, through the tears, do you know what they're sharing? Stories of joy, of what that loved one meant to them, and laughing hysterically, and then turning into crying again. And I leave those meetings with families, and I'm exhausted, and I'm tired, and I'm emotionally spent, but I'm also fulfilled. Guys, the abundant life feels everything. And I know that can be a scary thing. Because for me, personally, I'm good with the highs. I'm really good with the highs. Not that great with the lows. In fact, I avoid the lows at almost all costs. And when I avoid the lows, when I avoid reaching out to a friend who's just been diagnosed with stage 4, because that scares me. When I avoid that, I rob myself of the abundant life. And them of the abundant life when I avoid it. When we avoid it, we veg out with Netflix, which is basically a numbing thing, right? We veg out with Netflix or whatever it is for you. We drink to forget or to get numb. I find it interesting that spirits lead us to numbness. But the Spirit leads us to feel everything. Which one are you going to choose? Maybe I'll go on a spending spree. Get a little retail therapy going. Wrong song. That's the wrong song we're singing. And it's not in tune because the abundant life feels everything. And the abundant life gives everything. So if your entire thing is just accumulate, I'm just going to get everything that I possibly can because that's going to stop the feelings from coming in, and I'm just going to insulate myself with everything that I can possibly buy. I'm going to tell you that the abundant life gives everything. And to accumulate everything is the wrong song. Jesus says that we enter by the narrow gate. I don't know if you've ever hiked Annie's Canyon, but Annie's Canyon is pretty narrow. You know what I couldn't take through Annie's Canyon? Pretty much all my stuff. I cannot fit a U-Haul through Annie's Canyon. And I've never seen a U-Haul following a hearse. Have you? You can't take it with you. The abundant life gives everything. Let me just give you a little secret tip. It's easy to give somebody else's stuff away. Do you agree? My wife organizes for a living. That's what she does throughout the week. She organizes people's stuff. She organizes their garages, their kitchens, their pantries, their whatever. So if it's overflowing, call my wife. She loves giving other people's stuff away. It's like her favorite thing. Oh, you don't need that stuff anymore. I'm just going to give it away. But when it's our own stuff, don't look in my garage. It's harder to give my own stuff away, right? It's harder to give my own stuff away. So here's the trick. It's not yours anyway. It's not mine. It's not yours. We don't own this stuff. We're stewards of this stuff. We get to manage all of this stuff. All of this stuff, it just belongs to God. Take it like this. This is the mentality going forward. Let's say you're just walking down the street, and let's just say you have no job whatsoever. You're down on your luck, nothing whatsoever, and you're just trying to figure your life out. And some dude comes up to you and is like, hey, I want you to come run my company. And not only am I going to have you run my company that's very profitable, we do storage units or something, right? So we're going to give you all of the management over the storage units. You get everything. I just ask for 10%. Would you take that deal? Would you take that deal? Wait, you want me to run everything and accumulate everything? You just want 10% of this? Sure, I'll take that deal all day long. I had nothing else going on. But when we start thinking all of this is mine, we're going to hold on to everything that we possibly can. But the abundant life says to give everything away. Philippians 2:6, here's what Jesus said. Not what Jesus said, it's what Jesus did. Put that verse. Do I have that verse? Philippians 2:6? I do. Who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Who had everything? Jesus. Who gave everything? Jesus. Who calls us into the abundant life? Jesus. Who calls us to follow him? Jesus. So what does that mean I should do with my life? Gain everything. Wrong song. Wrong song. In fact, Jesus says it again when he's talking to the rich young ruler in Matthew chapter 19. Rich young ruler says, I've obeyed the commands, I've done this, what else do I need to do? Jesus says, sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and then come follow me. And the rich young ruler walks away sad because he was a man of great wealth. So what is Jesus asking me to do? Give it all away. Whatever it looks like. I'm going to see so many homes flood the market. It's crazy. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Unless you need to. This is what I mean. We're holding on to our stuff like this. Jesus wants us to hold on to stuff like this. Man, this isn't mine. You need to borrow my car? Go for it. You need whatever I have to, it's not mine. Use it. Whatever you want. It's not my stuff. You want to run it into a light pole or something? Well, that's going to be a little bit of a headache, but it wasn't mine to begin with. There's so much freedom in giving it away. So what does that look like for you? Jesus gave everything so that I could gain everything. To be honest, Jesus gave everything so that I could gain everything. But in order to gain everything, I have to give up everything. The abundant life gives everything. And there's a trust aspect to that. The third thing that we look at is the abundant life surrenders everything. The abundant life surrenders everything. Well, it's not like giving everything, kind of, but I needed a third point. I like to hold on to control, personally, for me. Control is something, I love to try to control every scenario. I like to just let me take care of it and I'll make sure that everything's good. Let me control it. But surrender, the abundant life, means I have to surrender everything. If I'm trying to control everything, it's the wrong song and I'm going to end up stressed out. Very stressed out. Surrender looks, if I can be completely honest with you, surrender looks a lot like death. And that scares me. The relationship I have with death is when I was 4, my younger brother, I think I've shared this before, my younger brother tragically died. When I was 4, he was 2. So the first memory I have is of death. And I've spent my entire life running away from death and running away and holding on to control. God, I don't want to surrender everything over to you because I've seen what happens in life, and I'm afraid if I let you hold on to this, God, you're just going to strike me down like Job. Can I just be completely vulnerable and real with you this morning? That's my fear. So I try to control. Guys, that's where I start singing the wrong song. I'm cool with feeling everything. I'm cool with giving stuff away, but I'm not cool with surrendering everything. God, you're asking too much. And I think if we're honest in this room, a lot of you would probably agree with me. God, nope. You are asking way too much, and I can't do that. Because surrender looks a lot like death. But there's no other way. Matthew 16, it's going to be on the screen here. Matthew 16 says, Then Jesus said to his disciples, Whoever wants to be my disciple, not just the super Christians, not just the ones who show up every single Sunday, every single Wednesday, every single Tuesday, your life group, everything, like whatever you do, like you're all in, not just them. Whoever wants to be my disciple must, not should, Not it'd be cool if, must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Verse 25, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? The abundant life surrenders everything. So maybe this life just isn't working out for you. Maybe it doesn't seem like it's the right thing for you. Maybe it seems like, gosh, I don't know what's going on in this world right now. I don't know why things aren't adding up. Maybe it's because we haven't surrendered everything over to the abundant life. Because that way is narrow. And I'm going to tell you guys, that way is very narrow. There are very few people that I have met in life with this mentality. I don't like preaching this message because you know who doesn't have this mentality? Me. And who's convicted about this? Me. And who's going to do something about this? Not me. Because we're going to walk out of here and be like, good sermon, or not that great of a sermon, and then go on with our lunch. This is the rhythm that God's called us into. This rhythm of death and renewal. And it's not just a death one time to self and then, now I'm good. You don't just get to say one prayer and then like, okay, on with the rest of my life. Death and renewal. Death and renewal. Death and renewal. And not just the bad parts of my life. I'm good putting to death the bad parts of my life. But every single part of my life is death and renewal, death and renewal, death and renewal. That's the song. That's the rhythm. I find it interesting that in the Genesis creation story, when you look back in Genesis chapter 1, it says that when God created the heavens and the earth, every single day, he says there was, do you know what he starts with? Evening. And there was morning the first day. Second day, there was evening and there was morning the second day. There was evening and there was morning the third day. That's death and renewal. Over and over and over and over again. God baked it into the rhythm of our life that when we lay down our head at night, we are, I don't want to be morbid, we are practicing death. Think about that for a second. When you lay down your head at night, do you have any control once you fall asleep? Medical people would probably be like, well, actually, yes, you have this. Shut up. In my brain, there's no control, okay? I don't get to control what I dream about. I don't get to control when I wake up. I don't get to, unless it's the alarm clock, I don't get to control those things. I have zero control. And so with this activity, I can now be prepared for death by every night laying down, examining the day. Be like, God, where did you see where I screwed up? God, where did I see you move? God, thank you for what you've given to me today. Now I lay my head down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. That's a nursery rhyme, Brian. That's not scripture. And then you wake up in the morning, resurrected. Isn't that exactly what Jesus went through on the cross? Isn't that exactly what we do when we go through baptism? Death, burial, resurrection. All of the rhythm of life is death and renewal, death and renewal, death and renewal. Those wildfires that happened up in LA. Do you know, I drove through Malibu just a couple of weeks ago going up north. And do you know what I saw? Renewal. New plant life coming up out of what was dead. God has his plan for death and renewal, death and renewal, death and renewal. Our life starts at death. The abundant life for you and for me starts at death. In John 10, later on, Jesus says that he lays down his life willingly. No one takes it from him. So surrender looks a lot like death. So this path you're on, this song you're singing? Is it who you meant to become or accidentally became along the way? Jesus says that he is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. So this abundant life that we're seeking after, it's found by feeling everything, giving everything, and surrendering everything. And for some of you in the room, you're just checking out church for the first time. You're like, what? I invite you into that. And for those of us that have been church and been Christians for a long time, and it's not adding up for us in life, it doesn't seem like an abundant life. We examine ourselves, God, where am I holding on to something? God, what am I neglecting to do for this abundant life? So we look to Jesus, we look to his life for the example. And if we are going to follow Jesus, basically what that means is that we are going to act like Jesus, we're going to be like Jesus. That's called discipleship. Now we've turned discipleship into something you do. Who are you discipling? What are you being discipled by? It's a verb. But disciple is something you are, not something you do. It's an identity you take on. And somewhere along the way, we've reduced discipleship down to an activity, usually surrounded by like a weekly meeting where you get together with a few other people and you go through an underwhelming book study together. Right? That's discipleship, right? But maybe disciple is actually something more than that. Maybe it means taking on the life of Jesus as your own and doing the things that Jesus did and looking through the Word and saying, okay, Jesus, how did you live your life and how can I emulate that? That's discipleship. The closest word we have to disciple is apprenticeship. That's the closest English translation to what the Hebrew word meant. Apprentice. If you're an apprentice for a mechanic, you're going to look at the mechanic. You're going to go to a shop and you're going to learn everything that the mechanic does. You're going to invest your life into this idea of being a mechanic. And eventually you're going to get your hands dirty, working, doing these things. So disciple of Jesus. What does your life look like? What does your prayer life look like? Disciple of Jesus. Luke 5, Luke 22, Mark 1, all reference Jesus going away to a place to pray, as he often does. That little line in there, as he often does, which means it wasn't a one-time occurrence. It's something Jesus often did. So, disciple, what does your prayer life look like? What does your study time look like? John 10:11 says the sheep know his voice and follow. The sheep know the shepherd's voice and they follow him. So what does your study time look like? Are you able to recognize his voice above all the other voices that are just thieves coming to steal, kill, and destroy? Can you recognize his voice? What does your community look like? Well, I don't have one. Unless you mean my beer buddies. That's my community. What does your community look like? Who are you investing your life in? What does your fasting look like? I don't really do that very often at all, unless I've got an appointment coming up and I need to fast. What does your giving look like? Well, whatever's left over, I'll do it, and I don't like it, but I'll do it. What does your work look like? I hate my job. What does your Sabbath look like? Wait, we still do that? What does your solitude look like? What does your surrender look like? I mean, that's a pretty short list, but you're like, dang, Brian, that list seems pretty long and legalistic. No. Yes. But to me, it looks narrow and hard. To me, it looks kind of like what Jesus called us into, to have an abundant life. It's amazing how abundant your life is when you start singing the right song. We're going to get ready to close. The band's going to come back up. And so I just ask you, church, does your life feel out of rhythm? Does it feel like this is not going the way that you thought it was? And I present to you that list again. What does your prayer life look like? What does your study time look like? What does your community look like? What does fasting look like? What does giving look like? What does work look like? What does Sabbath look like? What does solitude look like? What does surrender look like? Because those are all things Jesus practiced. And if the abundant life is found in the way Jesus lived, and I'm not doing half of the things on this list, do you see the problem? Jesus came so that we may have life and have it to the full. And so many of us are just comfortable sitting in the mundane life that we live, never going forward with what God's actually called us into, which is this beautiful feeling everything, giving everything, and surrendering everything over to Him. Sometimes these worship songs we sing, I don't know if you're like me, they don't seem to hit, right? And it's not because of the band, it's because I don't believe them. We're going to sing a song here in just a moment called Always on Time. We introduced it last week. We're going to sing it again this week. There's never been a day, never been a minute where God's not been in it. Something along those lines. You are always, always, always on time. Jesus, you are always, always, always on time. And if I'm going to be completely honest with you, sometimes that does not seem right. Because this abundant life doesn't seem very abundant. And Jesus, where are you right now? In the diagnosis? Where are you right now in the tragedy? Where are you right now in the job loss? Where are you right now in all of these things, God, that it doesn't make any sense? And what He's been telling me for 37 years is I've been with you this entire time. You're just choosing to fill your life with other things, trying to numb yourself out with what's going on inside of you. And your life's out of rhythm because of that. So would you come into the rest that I've given to you, is what Jesus is saying. Church, let's pray. Jesus, I hate giving this message because it means I have to do things different. God, that there's active work that I need to do in order to surrender my life over to you. God, there's active work that I need to do in order to give everything over to you. God, there's active work to feel everything. But God, I pray that this community would be a community that looks like an abundant life. Jesus, so that we can worship and praise you. We can practice this idea of death and renewal, death and renewal, death and renewal, every single moment of every single day, God. Jesus, I pray if there's anyone in this room that you're speaking to right now, that you're calling to say, I need you to surrender everything. God, I pray that in this moment right now that they would choose to surrender everything over to you.